go to John Holman, who joins us from Washington, D.C. John, once again, we heard from the president. He didn't have much to say, but can you bring us up to speed on the update he did give on what's happening in Iran?
Yeah, sure. The president was talking about the conflict just at the start of his address as an event marking Women's History Month. He said that it was going very well. He said that the nation of terror and hate would be punished. He's talking there about Iran, his words. He said as well that a lot of presidents should have been doing what he's done now. He likes to refer back to the 47 years in which he says that Iran has basically been provoking or attacking the United States in one way or another, and he's dealing with it. What he said actually before, he's also been speaking a bit on Truth Social, the social media site that he likes to use. Talking about oil prices, you just heard Malik there describing the situation with the Gulf country. He said that when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money, the United States, but it's far more important to me to stop Iran from having nuclear weapons. He took that a little bit off of his discourse, talking about the war. He was asked by a reporter yesterday on Wednesday, for victory to be declared, do we need to make sure that Iran can't make nuclear weapons and don't have the precursors for that? And he wouldn't answer that question, but it seems again to be going to the forefront of his mind. Of course, the follow-on from that is if you want to stop Iran from getting the ingredients or having the wherewithal to make nuclear weapons, then a lot of analysts are saying that you might need some sort of ground assault. You might need boots on the ground. And that's a question that's been reverberating around Washington and beyond, if that's even a possibility.
Well, John, the president on his Truth Social may have been trying to spin the issues that are being had now within the oil and gas industry, but he also, the administration has said it plans to issue temporary waivers for the Jones Act. Can you tell us why that is and why that might mean the president is feeling a bit more pressure than he's letting on?
Yeah, the president is definitely feeling a lot more, is definitely feeling pressure on the Strait of Hormuz, even though he's saying that everything is going great in the Strait. He said it was in great shape. He made that statement actually on a day yesterday when 6 vessels were attacked either in the Gulf or when they started trying to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So what his administration has done is released or planning to release from their strategic reserves 172 million barrels of oil. The International Energy Agency has also said that, that in total, and the 172 million barrels are part of that, they'll be releasing 400 million barrels of oil. So trying to alleviate some of the global pain. Remember that 1 in 5 barrels of oil globally in the trade of oil goes through that Strait of Hormuz. Another theme of the moment is when the US Navy will be ready to escort ships that are going through that Strait of Hormuz. There have been repeated calls for it to do so, but it isn't doing so yet.
John Holman, live for us in Washington, D.C. Thank you, John. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump had previously pledged to end foreign wars, but now as the joint U.S.-Israeli bombing campaign against Iran nears a 3rd week, he has not ruled out sending American ground troops into Iranian territory. Al Jazeera's Heidi Jo Castro reports.
So far, U.S. firepower against Iran has come from the seas and the skies. But a whole new face of war could open if U.S. ground forces enter Iran.
Could there be? Possibly, for very good reason.
Following classified briefings, Democrats in Congress say they believe that's where the war is heading.
We seem to be on a path toward deploying American troops on the ground in Iran to accomplish any of the potential objectives here.
What those objectives are remain unclear. Military experts say it would take many thousands of U.S. forces to wage ground battle against the IRGC, while a more targeted mission, like an attempt to assassinate Iran's new supreme leader like his father before him, would require fewer special ops forces. Former Pentagon spokesman and war veteran David Lapan says the lack of clarity to the U.S.'s military goals only further endangers troops.
Causes questions in the minds of U.S. forces about what exactly are they attempting to achieve?
And do those questions, can they lead to increased risk then?
They can, because the thing is that you always want to have folks that are completely focused on the mission and not distracted.
The first American casualties of the war, killed in retaliatory strikes on U.S. bases, have already returned home. Memorials to American soldiers killed in action dot communities across the country, and some, like this one, have empty spaces for more names to be added, the results of future conflicts. This is the most poignant reason why 3 out of 4 Americans oppose sending U.S. ground troops to Iran. Even some prominent voices in Trump's MAGA base have voiced disappointment.
What just seems so insane based on what he ran on. I mean, this is why a lot of people feel betrayed, right?
While the U.S. has a history of deploying a large force to overwhelm enemies, engagements in the Trump era have favored the use of special forces. Whatever route the U.S. president now chooses against Iran would be full of risks in a conflict unleashed with no clear end. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Washington.
And now from Washington, D.C., I'd like to bring in Gordon Gray, who is a former U.S. ambassador and Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs. It's good to see you again, Gordon. Thank you for being with us here. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke today, giving his first press conference of the conflict, and he said that the war in Iran aims to both neutralize its weapons capability and change the country's regime. I want to play this clip for you, and then I'll get your reaction to it.
Sure.
We will attack the regime and continue to destroy their nuclear program and their missile systems. These objectives we must achieve. We have added another objective, namely to create the circumstances and the conditions to get rid of this obnoxious regime.
Do you agree with the Israeli Prime Minister that during a campaign like this, the circumstances can be created for regime change?
I think it's highly unlikely. I think we've seen a succession process that went through, even though Ayatollah Khamenei Sr. Was killed, as well as other senior leaders. It's not as if the Iranian regime is not resilient. If you look at when it first came to power in 1979, shortly thereafter, it was attacked by Saddam Hussein. There were assassinations against regime leaders, one that severely injured Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, just to give some examples. They've been planning for succession for a long time. And as I said, it's a resilient regime. Mm-hmm. And we saw that notwithstanding how deeply unpopular the regime is among the Iranian people, the massive demonstrations in January were brutally put down and did not give any indication that there would be regime change from within.
Do you think that this reflects a change in tone from the Israeli Prime Minister? At the beginning of this, he was sort of very adamant that regime change would be essential to claiming victory in this conflict, but now it seems he's sort of moving more along President Donald Trump's line that the regime change is actually going to have to come from within Iran if it comes.
I think regime change has been something that Netanyahu has been pursuing for decades. I think what I found interesting about his remarks was that he was, I think, attempting to reinforce some of President Trump's remarks, which have been all over the place as far as the objectives. But more recently, Secretary Rubio has outlined far more limited goals for the war than either President Trump or Prime Minister Netanyahu. So I view the most recent remarks by Prime Minister Netanyahu that you just played as an attempt to control the agenda for the war.
Now, Gordon, the U.S. Treasury Secretary has also said that there is no price tag that would make this war too unaffordable to continue. Do you think that that's true?
No, that's just spin. look at what happened in 1970, or I shouldn't ask you to, I should ask the Treasury Secretary too. Look what happened in 1973 following the OPEC oil embargo, or more, perhaps even more relevant. Look what happened in 1979 after the Iran hostage crisis. Price of oil went up, inflation went up. President Carter suffered a dramatic setback at the polls. President Ronald Reagan was elected with virtually all of the electoral votes in our electoral college. President Trump, one of the reasons he won election in 2024 was that he promised to bring down prices. He promised to control inflation. In the State of the Union address, just 4 days before he launched this war, he was bragging about how low gasoline prices are. And now around where I live in the Washington, D.C. area, gasoline prices have gone up 20% in just 10 days. And every American voter passes a gas station or more and sees that price going up and up and up. And that's going to hurt the Republicans at the polls and in the midterm elections in November.
And Gordon, crucially, I think we also heard the first statement today from the new Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei. Did you find that was a statement that sort of presented continuity in terms of the strategy in Iran? And is that important for the continuation of the Iranian infrastructure and the Iranian institutions?
Well, I think the fact that he was selected as to succeed his father shows the continuity. I think the fact that he's got such close ties to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps shows an evolution rather than continuity. He has very thin Islamic credentials, but he's got very strong ties to the Revolutionary Guard Corps. What I also found interesting about his remarks was that they were read. He was not filmed reading them, and my understanding is there was no audio of him reading them. So how injured he might have been in the initial strikes is yet to be determined. But there hasn't been any proof that he's in good shape. Let's put it that way.
Gordon Gray, thank you very much for joining us here on Al Jazeera. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And if you are just joining us, here's a quick update of the major developments in the war between the U.S., Israel, and Iran that we are tracking this hour. Iran's new supreme leader has released his first message. Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei's statement was read on state TV. He said the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed and that Iran must remain united while it removes all threats. The Israeli army has launched what it says are wide-scale airstrikes in Iran. Explosions are being reported in the capital Tehran and areas nearby. The UN's refugee agency says more than 3 million people in Iran have been displaced by the ongoing war. The Israeli army also launched new strikes on the Lebanese capital. Israel and Hezbollah have been exchanging attacks for the past week and a half. An Israeli strike on Thursday night hit at least 2 sites in central Beirut. The leaders of the U.S. and Israel say they are winning their war against Iran. In separate press conferences on Thursday, President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran has suffered massive losses and they expect the fight to be over soon. Hezbollah and Iran carried out their first coordinated attack on Israel on Wednesday, and it's prompted speculation that Yemen's Houthis could get involved in the conflict. They've previously carried out strikes in the region in support of Iran. Yusuf Mauri has spoken to people in Sana'a about the possibility of being drawn into another war.
On the streets of Sana'a, people are going about their daily lives, seemingly unaffected by the conflict in the region. Some tell us they don't want war, but war always seems to find Yemen. Mirshid Hassan agrees, but he says his biggest concern is not the threat of strikes from above, but the threat of more US-backed sanctions.
We care greatly for our nation. We are not afraid of war, but fear the consequences of war, such as economic blockade and having limited access to basic necessities.
We asked Mirshid if he is considering moving to a safer location.
If we moved every time we hear of a potential war, we would be moving every other day. I know many people who still live in homes that have been destroyed by previous airstrikes. In any case, the US and Israeli are known to target everyone and anyone, wherever and whenever.
And now, the possibility of war may be closer than he thinks. Members of Ansarullah, also known as the Houthis, have expressed their willingness to strike US and Israeli assets in the region in support of Iran. Such a move could be significant. The group has previously demonstrated advanced capabilities, including launching hypersonic missiles that have reached Tel Aviv. The armed group does not need to fire a missile at US military bases to enter the war. Instead, they can resume a blockade on all US and Israeli ships in the Red Sea. It would likely be considered an act of war, one they have carried out in previous conflicts. For many Yemenis, like Mirshid and his family, this means being prepared and stocking up on supplies. Yusuf Maudi, Al Jazeera, Sana'a.
And joining us now from Washington, D.C. is Giorgio Cafiero. He's the CEO of Gulf State Analytics. Thank you very much for being with us here on Al Jazeera. We were just talking in that piece about the potential involvement of Houthis in this war, and I wonder if you think it could potentially disrupt shipping lanes in a much more significant way.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on your program. Always an honor to be your guest. Yes, absolutely. Everyone is keeping their eyes on Ansarullah, or the Houthi rebels in Yemen at this point. This is one of the really important variables to look at. If there is going to be a resumption of the group's attacks on maritime trade in and near the Bab al-Mandab, that will intensify the disruptions to the global economy, building on the disruptions that the world is already dealing with as a consequence of Iran's moves to effectively make the Strait of Hormuz a no-go area. This is definitely one form of leverage that Iran and the remnants of the axis of resistance have to further deter the United States and Israel from continuing the war on Iran at this point.
The idea, I'm assuming, would be that that would continue to rise the price of shipping through this area, continue to raise the price of oil and energy trying to transit around the world. I wonder, is there any other option for the energy industry trying to move its goods from this area at this point?
Well, with the Strait of Hormuz closed, the majority, although not quite all of the gas and oil exports from GCC states are really stuck. Of course, Saudi Arabia has access to the Red Sea. Also, the UAE is not entirely dependent on the Strait of Hormuz, but for countries including Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar, as long as the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed, or perhaps soon officially closed, there really are not viable alternatives as of now. This really speaks to the fact that Iran is able to leverage this geography to its advantage very easily.
I want to ask you about a post on Truth Social that the president put up today, saying that the United States is the largest oil producer in the world by far. So when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money. Is that true?
Well, there is a lot to say about the fact that, you know, the United States is a major oil producer. This certainly changes the dynamics in terms of Washington's foreign policy toward the oil-rich, gas-rich Gulf compared to previous decades when the picture was very different. But Let's keep in mind, though, that the effects of rising oil prices will certainly hit the U.S. economy in numerous ways. I think it's a little bit naive and oversimplistic to put it the way the president did. I think the average American will definitely be paying a price for the soaring oil prices. Of course, while the U.S. can play this card, being a major, hydrocarbon power itself, these markets are internationalized, and so these effects are going to be felt by really all countries around the world. The United States is not exempt from that.
As you mentioned that, I did ask this question to our previous guest, but I would like to get your thoughts on it as well, because the Energy Secretary today said that the Treasury Secretary, pardon me, said that there is no cost that will make this war too expensive to continue. And I wonder if you think that's true.
No, I mean, obviously, the United States, as I believe he admitted in less than 2 weeks, we spent $11 billion fighting this war. As I was mentioning a moment ago, the repercussions of this conflict are going to have an impact on your so-called average American, and the effects on the global economy are going to be incredibly disruptive. They already have been, and the longer this war goes on, more so. And this is part of Iran's strategy to basically make the costs of attacking Iran so high that the United States will eventually have to come to some sort of a ceasefire agreement with Tehran, and from Iran's perspective, hopefully come to a point where they realize that the costs of attacking Iran, again, are too high. Of course, there's going to be a point in which this war is too costly for the United States. I think probably those in Trump's administration need to, of course, be on the same page as Trump and try to back up his message. But I think we all know that, of course, there comes a point where this war will be too costly in many ways for the United States to continue it. Again, this is really part of Iran's strategy to try to create as much chaos and disruption worldwide to get the U.S. to a point where it simply assesses that it's not worth the fight anymore.
Giorgio Caffiero, we really appreciate your insights here on Al Jazeera. Thank you.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
In South Korea, the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran has pushed 14,000 businesses with ties to the Middle East into crisis. Many more that depend on petrochemicals are facing imminent closure, putting the industrialized economy there at risk. Jack Barton reports from Seoul.
South Korean plastics manufacturer Hwangman-ik inspecting the last bags of raw materials produced from crude oil. Only 1 in 4 workers remain, and all production is about to stop.
Yesterday, I got a phone call saying that suddenly there's a shortage of raw materials, so the raw material provider is no longer shipping them out.
It's a story being told across South Korea after US and Israeli attacks on Iran triggered an energy crisis far beyond the Middle East.
Everything is connected in a chain. So rather than just plastic factories being affected, petrochemicals have ripple effects across the entire industry.
A ripple that affects everything from automobiles and cosmetics to fertilizer and food, all of which are being hit by the additional impact of rising transport costs, leading to inflation, lowered growth forecasts, and a battered Korean won. 70% of South Korea's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz off the coast of Iran. Tehran's Revolutionary Guard has effectively closed the waterway as part of the war.
It would be advisable to work closely with strategic partner countries to swiftly identify alternative supply routes that do not pass through the Strait of Hormuz.
But alternatives will come at a higher price, and they will arrive too late for many.
The domestic economy is already extremely bad and has already sunk to the bottom. And if on top of that we face destruction of raw material supply, then factories like ours would have difficulty surviving.
Until oil transit returns to normal, all Hwang can do is oversee the final order his company can fill on a machine about to fall silent. Jack Barton, Al Jazeera, Seoul.
Here's a look at some of the other stories that are making news. Displaced Palestinians forced to flee Israeli strikes have returned to Gaza City to find their tent camps destroyed. The Israeli army bombarded their shelters on Wednesday. Israel continues to attack the Strip despite a U.S.-brokered truce reached in October. Gaza's health ministry says more than 600 Palestinians have been killed since that ceasefire was declared.
We returned and found everything destroyed. We have no tents, nothing. Our lives are destroyed. They destroyed us in Shuja'iyya and our house was gone. We left only with the clothes we had on. We did not grab any clothes. Here now it's the same thing. We have no clothes and nothing left. No food or drinks. Even our children, they're all young.
Israel's military says it's dropping charges against 5 soldiers accused of beating and sexually abusing a Palestinian detainee. The 2024 assault was partially caught on camera. The soldiers were arrested at a military prison, prompting protests from the far-right government and from hardline ultra-nationalists who overran the facility. The Public Committee Against Torture in Israel has condemned the decision as another whitewash of abuses by the military. The Netherlands and Iceland have both joined the South Africa-led genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Both countries have submitted arguments on the case, which accuses Israel of violating the Genocide Convention through its military operations inside Gaza. Iceland and the Netherlands say forced displacement and harm to children could be significant additional factors in the case. William Shabas is a professor specializing in human rights and international criminal law. He says the ICJ's case against Israel's genocide in Gaza will impact its diplomatic relations with other countries.
I think these are the 17th and 18th states to intervene in the case. All but one of them have intervened effectively to support the South African case. And one of the very important aspects of the intervention by the Netherlands is that they have relied on an earlier intervention that they did in another case on genocide, the one between Gambia and Myanmar, that they co-signed with Canada, Germany, France, the UK, and Denmark. And so they are bringing that position to bear on the debate in the South African case. It's going to strengthen it very much, and I think it will have a powerful influence on the deliberations. It can rule, for example, that there are reparations to be paid, that there are various other consequences of a ruling that Israel is responsible for committing genocide. Then there will be a problem of enforcement, because the court is not really equipped to enforce its judgments. That's just part of the architecture of the international system. And so then it falls to other institutions to enforce it, principally the organs of the United Nations, but it will have an impact also in domestic law. So if Israel is found to be responsible for genocide, this is going to have big consequences for its relations with other countries. It's going to be devastating for Israel.
Israeli settlers have set a mosque on fire in Duma in the north of the occupied West Bank. It's the second incident of its kind in less than a month. Israeli police have opened an investigation, but for Palestinians, there is little hope of justice. Nida Ibrahim reports from Duma in the occupied West Bank.
A house of prayer set on fire. Palestinian firefighters contained the blaze at this mosque in the village of Doma, near Nablus in the occupied West Bank. Israeli settlers carried out the attack after midnight on Thursday and then fled the scene. But they left behind a message. It reads, "From Ben Nachman Synagogue." They're referring to a Jewish prayer house that was part of an illegal Israeli settlement outpost near Ramallah. The Israeli army recently dismantled this outpost and 2 others and pushed settlers off the land. As much as this graffiti is a message to Palestinians living here, it's also directed at the Israeli authorities, a warning that settler groups will retaliate. Illegal Israeli settlement outposts are growing. Dozens have been established in recent weeks. Authorities have removed fewer than a handful. They are mostly used as launch pads for settler attacks. And since the Israeli-US offensive on Iran started almost 2 weeks ago, Israeli settler violence has killed at least 6 Palestinians. Israeli forces raided the village to investigate the attacks, but people here tell us these investigations rarely go anywhere. This has emboldened settlers whose attacks have intensified, empowered by impunity. From the north to the south of the occupied West Bank, Israeli settlers are moving freely, attacking with precision and seemingly without fear. Because as Palestinian people here will tell you, there are few consequences for violence against their communities. Ibrahim, Al Jazeera, Douma, occupied West Bank.
In Ethiopia, more than 100 people have been killed in landslides triggered by days of heavy rain. Regional officials say the landslides hit several areas of the Gamo zone earlier this week. At least 50 people are missing. Rescue teams and residents are searching for survivors. A suspect involved in an attack on a synagogue in the U.S. state of Michigan has been shot dead. Thick black smoke was seen billowing out of the site, with reports suggesting the fire was the result of a car ramming. There are no reports of any other casualties. The attack took place in the area of West Bloomfield. U.S. President Donald Trump described the incident as, quote, a terrible thing. The synagogue also houses a daycare. Passenger train services between China and North Korea are resuming for the first time in nearly 6 years. The routes were suspended when Pyongyang sealed its borders during the COVID-19 pandemic. The reopening reflects Beijing's efforts to strengthen ties with one of its closest allies. Katrina Yu reports.
For the first time since 2020, this train is carrying passengers from China to North Korea. Routes linking Beijing and the Chinese border city of Dandong to Pyongyang were suspended when North Korea closed its borders during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now the country is slowly reopening after years of isolation, drawing interest from some travelers.
I'm curious about life in North Korea. If I had a chance to travel there, I would. A train makes it very convenient.
The train will stop at several Chinese cities before entering North Korea. Travel is tightly controlled. For now, tickets are limited to government officials and business people.
This is the first train to leave Beijing bound for Pyongyang in almost 6 years. The journey to the North Korean capital takes about 24 hours, and the older style locomotive and carriages stand out at a station now dominated by China's high-speed rail network.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visited China in September to attend a major military parade alongside President Xi Jinping. But Pyongyang has also been strengthening ties with Moscow, expanding military cooperation during Russia's war in Ukraine. That's raised questions about whether Beijing is losing influence over its northern neighbor. Yet China remains Pyongyang's top trading partner, an economic lifeline, while the country remains under international sanctions over its nuclear weapons program. North Korea is also working to develop a tourism industry. Kim Jong-un opened this coastal resort last year, hoping it will become a world-class destination. An influx of Chinese visitors, potentially arriving via this rail link, could be key to its success. Katrina Yu, Al Jazeera, Beijing.
I'm Riley Carlson, and I'll be back in just a moment with the latest updates on the war between the U.S., Israel, and Iran.
On my left, you can see the thick column of the smoke. That is the continuation of the American and Israeli strikes.
Women, children killed in an Israeli strike that targeted southern Lebanon.
Continuing to hear the sound of sirens. According to Israeli media, one drone has infiltrated the borders.
There is a move in Congress to basically tie Donald Trump's hands and end the conflict. They say that's not America first, that's Israel first.
There is so much concern about what all this is going to do to energy markets, oil prices, gas prices, not just in the region, but around the world.
Stay with Al Jazeera for the latest developments. In-depth analysis of the day's headlines.
Is this a genuine attempt to revive Venezuela's oil industry or surrender of state control under pressure?
Critical debate.
Netanyahu has repeatedly threatened to annex the West Bank.
Netanyahu doesn't have to annex the West Bank because effectively it's already happened.
Informed opinions.
It's still the richest, most powerful country on earth, and the idea that it's always been cheated and that needs to put tariffs, I think the world is getting tired of that.
Inside Story on Al Jazeera.
A
diverse range of stories from across the globe, from the perspective of our network's journalists. On Al Jazeera.
Iran's new supreme leader vows to keep the Strait of Hormuz shut in his first public statement since his appointment. After unleashing relentless attacks on Iran, Israel's prime minister now says regime change in the country can only happen from within. Israeli forces strike at the heart of Beirut while the southern suburbs of the Lebanese capital come under renewed attacks. And strikes on energy facilities. The International Energy Agency warns the conflict is causing the biggest disruption in the history of the global oil market. Almost 2 weeks since the United States and Israel launched attacks on Iran, the war is continuing to send shockwaves around the world. For the first time, we have heard from leaders on all three sides of this conflict. In the first public statement since his appointment, Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has vowed for revenge. He warned that the Strait of Hormuz, that vital shipping route for global energy supplies, will remain closed. And he said attacks on U.S. bases in the region will continue unless those bases are closed. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also appeared, issuing veiled threats to Iran's new supreme leader. After 13 days of intense bombardment, he says Iran has suffered serious blows, but suggested that any regime change will ultimately depend on the Iranian people.
If I was an insurance agent, I wouldn't issue the leaders of Iran or Hezbollah with life insurance, and I won't share with you what we will do to those two individuals. With regard to Iran's nuclear capabilities, I have said that we have attacked their nuclear infrastructure and we have assassinated one of Iran's top nuclear scientists. I believe there will be surprises at the end of this battle. I am required to maintain some combat secrecy, but what I can share with you is that we have more of an upper hand than we anticipated, and we will achieve our objectives.
U.S. President Donald Trump says the war is, quote, coming along very well, and he once again downplayed concerns over rising oil prices.
The situation with Iran is moving along very rapidly. It's doing very well. Our military is unsurpassed. There's never been anything like it. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And we're doing what has to be done. Should have been done during a 47-year period. Could have been done by a lot of different people. They chose not to do it. But they really are a nation of terror and hate, and they're paying a big price right now.
But energy markets remain volatile, with oil returning to around $100 a barrel before going back down. The International Energy Agency is warning this could become the largest oil supply disruption in history. And inside Iran, U.S. and Israeli strikes continue to pound the country, with parts of the capital Tehran reduced to ruins. The attacks are causing a major displacement crisis in both Iran and in Lebanon. These are some of the latest images that are coming out of the Iranian capital and areas nearby. The Israeli army said on Thursday that it is beginning what it calls a wide-scale wave of airstrikes there. The UN's refugee agency says more than 3 million people in Iran have been displaced by the ongoing war. Many have fled Tehran and other major cities to areas in the north. Air defense systems have been activated in the Lebanese capital as the Israeli army launches a new round of strikes there. Israel and Hezbollah have been exchanging attacks for the past week and a half. Israel has bombed southern Lebanon and the southern suburbs of Beirut, but strikes on Thursday night have hit the city's central areas, including one site about a kilometer from the prime minister's office. We are covering all the developments for you from Washington, D.C., Doha, Amman, Beirut, Tehran, and Erbil in northern Iraq. That is where Al Jazeera's Asad Beg is standing by because Assad, U.S. Central Command says one of its refueling aircraft has gone down in western Iraq. Can you tell me what more you're learning about that?
Yes, U.S. Central Command have issued a statement saying that they're aware of a loss of a C-135 refueling aircraft. Now, what they say is that it came down in friendly airspace and rescue efforts are ongoing. Now, importantly, what they say is that there were two aircrafts involved. One went down, the other one landed safely. But they stress that it was not a result of hostile or friendly fire. However, there is an armed group in Iraq. Now, they say they were responsible for bringing it down using a surface-to-air missile. Now, none of this can be independently verified or confirmed, but as we get information, we will let you know. But this is the latest, and it is the first of its incident that we know of the U.S., at least in this latest conflict, admitting to losing such an aircraft.
And Assad, in the meantime, the French military now says that 6 of its soldiers have been wounded in a drone attack in the Erbil region. What more are you learning about this incident?
Yes, this took place on a joint Peshmerga French base, about 60 kilometers from the regional capital here in Erbil, southwest of here, in a place called Mahmoud. Now, we're hearing from local reports. The governor of Erbil has spoken to local media. Now, what he says is 2 drones targeted that base and 6 French soldiers were injured. Now, this is the first of its kind in terms of an incident where foreign soldiers have been injured. We have had injuries and deaths in local forces, but not foreign ones. Now, we also have seen images of a fire at that base or near that base, but we also hear from armed Iraqi groups aligned to Iran that they have been launching drones and missiles at U.S. assets here in North Iraq in the Kurdish region. But this is the first time we're hearing about French troops being injured. But what else is happening is that there has been an increase of attacks. We've been saying for days that there's been an escalation. Now, Aziz Ahmed, the Deputy Chief of Staff for the Prime Minister here in the Kurdish region, said since yesterday, the region has been attacked more than 35 times using drones and missiles. And an armed Iraqi group has now issued a statement warning people of the Dadaman Hotel, not far from here, in fact, in Erbil, the capital of the Kurdish region here.